So to be a managing broker, what does it take to get to that point? You have to start as an agent that works underneath a managing broker for a number of years, or how does that work?
Correct. So each state has a different real estate commission, which is typically the governing body for the licensing, and they have different requirements. Most of the time, there's two components. One component being a number of years acting as a salesperson or an agent, and a number of transactions. Some states even require that those transactions be of a certain type before you can obtain, the next level of licensing. So that's the path that I chose. Most of my sales all occurred in the state of Missouri before I got my first brokerage license, and that's typically how each of the states operate. Some states do recognize and accept reciprocity. So if you're licensed in one state as a salesperson, some of them may have less of a requirement for you to obtain an equivalent license in that state. And same thing goes for the brokerage licensing as well.
And I assume this is your full-time gig, right? Like this is all you're doing.
Yeah.
Are there people on your team that do this kind of like part-time?
Yep, it does exist, and it's something that licensees or real estate agents on all sectors of the real estate industry, residential, land, commercial, a lot of them are part-time agents. They have another primary source of income, and just based upon their level of interest in the industry, that's how much time and effort they put into it, and their sales reflect that.
Because my next question was going to be like, what are the typical sizes, uses, and values of the properties you sell? Is it ever anything other than agricultural and recreational? Like, do you sell just residential vacant lots ever, or commercial or anything like that?
Absolutely. That would fall within that realm. And it all depends on, what market you're in. Here, or as it relates to me in my direct market in Missouri, our headquarters is about 30, 45 minutes south of St. Louis, right along the Mississippi River. I reside just a little bit further south from Walt. So most of my sales in my market here, just south, but still relatively close to the St. Louis metropolitan area, are of smaller acreage, just because development and progress has reached this point. So I do a lot more residential lots as it pertains to land or vacant land here closer to the St. Louis area. But as we get further out, whether that's west or directly south, obviously there's been less progress, less development. So some of those acreages are much larger in size, and that's typically where I will support clients with properties of much greater magnitude and might fit different molds like agricultural or recreational as opposed to residential development lots.
So a lot of people in our community, a lot of us are land flippers. So we're buying vacant lots for a pretty cheap price relative to their market value and then selling them either at market value or someplace close to that, maybe slightly discounted. And just makes me wonder, like, what profile would it need to fit for somebody to bring it to you and for you to be happy to list that for them? Like, does it have to be a minimum value or certain size? Or like, for example, if I bought a property for $1,000 and tried to sell it for $4,000, I'm assuming that's probably too small, like for you to waste your time with. Is that accurate? Like, what would be a minimum value to which you're like, okay, yep, now we'll get involved?
Not necessarily. I think with some agents out there, they may have that perspective on that example that you provide. But with me and how I support an investor, I think that might be a follower of yours, I don't turn anything down because I know that could lead to another opportunity with that same individual. And that individual may grow into larger properties that will ultimately have a better return on investment for myself, as they are representing me from a real estate perspective. So, in that specific example, I would suppose that yes, I would take that on and be happy to support you. Now, if it was 4 hours away from me and it really, really just didn't make sense, so maybe I could at least give guidance on how to successfully get that property flipped as opposed to me being directly involved or charging, the traditional fees that I would or a different type of property. But for the most part, I've never turned anything down. I can't say that I've ever done that to any of my investors or any client that's come to me.
Wow. That's awesome. Now, what kind of commission do you typically charge on these properties you sell? Like, is there a range or, I don't know, a minimum dollar amount or something like that?
Absolutely. So typically we, as you might suspect, are based on a percentage. Those percentages can range anywhere from 4% to 7%, depending on what the property is. One thing that I like to offer, and I think it's fair to both sides, especially if some of them I'm going to be doing business with frequently, is a variable rate commission, where, for example, as you may know, the listing agent the representative of the seller may not always be the one to find the buyer or procure the buyers for that property. And at that point, we're then obligated to share the commissions with a different brokerage, co-broke the property, which we're always happy to do. There's rarely ever any occasion where we wouldn't be willing to do that. So this variable rate commission structure is typically put in place when you have that potential. Usually that rate, there's two rates, usually separated by about a percentage point. A good example of this would be a 4 and 5% commission rate on the sale price. If in that example, if I were to procure the buyer on this listing, we would be at the lesser of those two rates, the 4% of the sale price, ultimately putting more money in the pocket of the client because we're not obligated to share commissions with another brokerage. Whereas if another brokerage brought the buyer, we would be at the higher of those two rates, 5%, just to make it worthwhile for everybody involved.
I've heard a 10% commission for a lot of agents elsewhere. And I didn't hear you say 10%. So why don't you guys do 10%? Just out of curiosity.
We have heard 10% in some markets. Our market, at least where I'm at, specifically here in Missouri, we don't see rates that high. There are a lot of very reputable and worthy brokerages out there that we compete with. We feel that we're one of the best out there, just based upon our resources, our skill set with marketing and our industry knowledge overall. But we still don't feel that in our best interest to try to be quite so competitive in commission structure if we want to continue to grow and support our clientele. So yeah, I have heard of commission rates that high, but they don't ever reach that point here in my direct market, south of St. Louis and in Missouri. The most we see is going to be around that 7% mark.